All right, we got a beautiful day here. Beautiful fall day. It's cold out, but it's nice and sunny, and there's, not a lot of people outside. Notice that there's just a lot less people outside in general. I think that has to do with the technology, with the cell phones and entertainment at the palm of your hand. I think there's just less people that go outside. Even when the weather's like relatively warm, you just don't see many people out. You just don't see as much people outside. Not to say that people don't go outside, but as I've said in other videos, previous generations pretty much had to go outside if they wanted to have fun. That guy's just doing laps around the parking lot like he's drifting. But it wasn't an option, a couple generations ago to just go on your phone or to play, really in-depth video games. I think like the Atari was around, but there wasn't online gaming or computer gaming really. That wasn't really developed yet. So people were a lot more active a few generations ago, and there wasn't like an easy escape to your phone or to like Netflix or all these TV series that can just eat up a bunch of your time, or movies, right? So there's so many ways now that you can get entertainment or use your time without really leaving where you live or your house or your apartment or wherever you are. So there's just less people outside. And I've talked about this in a lot of videos. I don't know how most people are deciding to have kids today unless you're like doing well financially. And I was listening to a guy, even, I think he said he was married. It's that guy that talks about, I think his name's Freddie, but he's talking about it's just him and his wife, and he does have a mortgage on a 3-bed, 2-bath house. And some of his expenses sounded like he could cut it down a little bit, like for there were some things in there that maybe I wouldn't have included, but all in all, it sounded like it was kind of normal. And it was $7,000 a month that he was spending between his mortgage and groceries and insurance and miscellaneous expenses, haircuts, that sort of stuff. So $7,000 a month with your mortgage. I don't think that's crazy. It's him and his wife, so it's $3,500 a month per person. And that's obviously real money, so that's post-tax money. So you're spending $7,000 times 12 just to exist. 7,000 times 12 is like $85,000 roughly, $84,000 that you're spending. And that's really before you do like anything. That's before he did investing. That's before he does saving money. That's before you do like any vacations or anything like that. So you can see how you have to kind of be making a pretty good income before before you would maybe consider having kids. And he didn't have any kids. He's spending $84,000 a year without any kids. If you add kids to that, it's only going to go up, right? And he already has a house. He's paying a mortgage payment. So, what's the rational response to that? It's not a problem for people that have a bunch of money, right? It never is. Nothing's a problem. You can buy a new car. You can invest in whatever you want. You can go on vacations. You can buy gifts for everyone in your family. You can have a second house wherever you want. You can spend half the year here, half the year there. You don't have to work. That's never been a problem for like the small percentage of people that are rich, right? They can do whatever they want. But when you're talking about replacing the population or having just the general normal person have kids, if their life isn't affordable, and having kids is like a huge strain or just not even something that's feasible because there's just not enough money, then I don't know why it's surprising that there's less kids. right? Because you're not creating an environment where people can afford it. They're already working, both people are working, and they can barely afford their expenses. A lot of people don't even have a house, so they're not making a mortgage payment, they're making a rent payment, and they can barely afford their own life. That's without a house, and that's without kids. And that's potentially with both people working. So you're working and your significant spouse or your partner is working as well. And there's not enough money. There's really not enough money to comfortably live. But then you throw on a kid or 2 kids or 3 kids, it just becomes not even possible, right? So that is my explanation as to why people are having less kids. Yes, there will always be people that have kids. There will always be people who can afford to have kids. And there will certainly be people who can't afford to have kids that will still have kids, right? So people that shouldn't be having kids because they don't have a good foundation, they still have kids, right? But that number, I think, has gone down because people really realize, this is going to stress my life out so much more financially, emotionally, mentally, that, I'm going to really avoid trying to do it. Now, of course, people still have kids, right? Accidents happen or people will have a kid when they're not planning to. But I think a lot of people have just taken precautions and said, I'm just really going to be careful and I'm not going to have a kid and I might never have kids because it's just too much responsibility. It's too much money. And again, if you were surviving well on your own and you were doing well and you had a decent job and you were making good money and your purchasing power was okay and your spouse and you were in a good place and you had stability, of course you could go ahead and have kids, right? You could pretty much do whatever you want at that point. But I think people are wising up to it and they're just evaluating their own life circumstances. They say, would a kid, would it be advisable for me to have a kid right now? Just based on all the financial requirements and the time and the energy that you need to support children. I think a lot of people are saying no. So I don't really necessarily see how that gets better, like in the short term, because if housing is unaffordable and home ownership is not attainable for average working people, then I don't think you're going to have a lot of younger people or people that are in their 20s and 30s having children if they are living in an apartment. Some people will, yes, but I think most people will just not. They're not going to do it. And of course, with more women working, it's just you have more women in the workforce, and they're not pigeonholed into just having kids. So they're working, they're doing their career, and I've said it multiple times, but they're not focused on having kids maybe until they're older. So if you don't start until you're older, you're just going to have less kids, and you might not have any kids at all because you're not starting until you're 32 or 30. And 2-3 generations ago, people were starting to have kids at 18 years old or 19 years old. That was pretty common. 18 to 21 years old, people were having kids, 2-3 generations ago. So I think that's the issue. I think people still want to have kids. I think people still get fulfillment out of it. But with the way things are set up, and the internet certainly hasn't helped, right? All the dating apps and all the shallow behavior that happens, people don't really meet organically. And then I think, especially nowadays, as soon as someone sees a flaw in someone or something they don't like, they use that as a reason to just move on because they have the internet and they see that there's millions of other options out there. And so they just say, oh, well, Mr. Right or Mrs. Right will come along and I'm just going to, I don't like something about this person, so I'm just going to move on from them. And so people are not committing to each other. And you have women working more, so they're focused more on their career than they historically have been. because they couldn't really work a couple generations ago. So you have more women working and less relationships, less families, less kids. Going to have an issue with not as much tax money coming in and all these liabilities. So I just see it as the continuation of inflation, all this money that the government has promised to pay people who are getting older. And as those people get older, they're not going to be able to work. And there's not enough young people to support the system. So the government's going to have to create a bunch of money out of nothing, which will cause inflation. It will devalue your currency. That's why you see the prices of assets just go up, very, very high. Even speculative assets like cryptocurrency, way up, because they know the government's faking it. They're just creating all this money out of thin air, and the value of the currency will just continue to go down over time because there's not enough real production or there's not enough workers being productive. All this money is just being printed into existence or typed into a keyboard, and it's causing the prices of everything to rise. People can't afford homes. They're not having the same standard of living that they did 2 to 3 generations ago. Okay, so that's just the reality. It's not really to complain or to be negative about it. I just think that's the reality. I do think there's always people, like I said in the beginning, there's always people that will be thriving regardless of the conditions, and there's always people that will be doing really bad. But I think now, if you just take a slice and you look at the average person now, the average person a couple generations ago could have a pretty good job and support a family on a job that required basically no skills and probably didn't even require college. And now you have all these people that are going to college. They have college degrees. They spent $100,000 or more on college, and they can't even get a job that's better than making $20 an hour. And they certainly can't afford home ownership. And they have no pathway really to like a family or like the American dream with a house and a good job and newer vehicles, vacations, a partner, two to 3 kids. That all just seems like a pipe dream for a lot of people. And a couple generations ago, it was somewhat normal. So what do you guys think? That's just the reality of it. I'm not really trying to, say anything positive or negative. That's just the reality. And I think when people are living in that reality, they decide, I'm not gonna make my life so much harder by having kids, right? Because that will make your life harder, because you're going to have more expenses and less time, and your overhead's going to go up. So that's what's happening. You guys let me know what you think. I'm just going to go, maybe go work out or drive around and enjoy the day. Subscribe if you want. Leave your comments if you want. See you on the next one. Take care.